The morning sun cast long shadows across the forward operating base as General Marcus Thompson made his routine inspection rounds. The dust kicked up by his polished boots created small clouds that danced in the desert air. He had been commanding forces in this godforsaken stretch of Afghanistan for 18 months, and every sunrise brought the same mixture of determination and weariness that came with leading soldiers in harm's way. Thompson was a man who believed in seeing everything firsthand. While other generals preferred briefing rooms and satellite feeds, he walked among his troops, checking equipment, asking questions, and maintaining the kind of presence that inspired confidence in the ranks. At 52, his weathered face and steel-gray hair spoke of decades spent in service to his country, from a young lieutenant in Iraq to his current position commanding the 82nd Airborne Division's forward elements. As he rounded the corner of the main barracks, Thompson's attention was drawn to a figure lying prone behind a massive rifle positioned on an elevated platform overlooking the valley below. The weapon was immediately recognizable, a Barrett M82.50 caliber sniper rifle, a beast of a gun that could reach out and touch targets at distances that seemed impossible to those unfamiliar with precision shooting. What caught the general's attention wasn't just the rifle or the shooter's perfect form. It was the absolute stillness of the figure behind the scope. In his years of military service, Thompson had observed many snipers at work, but there was something different about this one. The shooter's breathing was so controlled it was barely perceptible, the grip on the rifle so natural it seemed like an extension of their body. Thompson slowed his pace, not wanting to disturb what appeared to be either training or an actual engagement. The base's perimeter was always under threat from insurgent activity, and the elevated position provided perfect overwatch of the main approach routes. He moved closer, his curiosity getting the better of his usual protocol of not interrupting soldiers at their posts. The shooter was smaller than he expected, wearing standard combat gear that seemed somehow too large for their frame. A desert camouflage boonie hat was pulled low, obscuring most of their face, and shooting glasses reflected the morning light. What struck Thompson most was the economy of movement. Every adjustment was minimal and purposeful, the mark of someone who had spent countless hours perfecting their craft. As he approached within 20 feet, Thompson could hear the steady rhythm of controlled breathing that all expert marksmen developed. For counts in, pause, for counts out, pause, and, in that natural respiratory pause, the moment when the body was most still, that's when the shot would come if needed. He had learned this technique himself during his early infantry days, though he had never achieved anything close to the level of proficiency he was witnessing. The general positioned himself where he could observe without creating a distraction. Through his binoculars, he scanned the valley below, trying to identify what had captured the sniper's attention. The terrain was typical for this region: rocky outcroppings, sparse vegetation, and numerous positions where hostile forces could establish themselves. Intelligence reports had indicated increased enemy activity in this sector over the past week, making the overwatch position critically important. Thompson's radio crackled softly with routine communications from various units across the base. He turned down the volume, not wanting to compromise the sniper's concentration. In his experience, the difference between life and death in these situations often came down to the smallest details: the ability to hear a footstep, detect movement in peripheral vision, or maintain absolute focus despite distractions. The morning progressed with the sniper maintaining their vigil. Thompson found himself impressed by the level of discipline being displayed. Lesser soldiers might have shifted position, taken water breaks, or shown signs of fatigue, but this shooter remained motionless except for the minute adjustments required for effective observation. It reminded him of the dedication he had seen in elite units, the Rangers, Special Forces, and Marine Scout snipers who had crossed his path during joint operations. Around mid-morning, the sniper's posture changed almost imperceptibly. Thompson, who had been observing for over an hour, noticed the subtle shift immediately. The breathing pattern adjusted, becoming even more controlled. The grip on the rifle tightened slightly, and there was a barely detectable forward lean that suggested target acquisition. Thompson raised his binoculars again, scanning the area where the sniper's attention was focused. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the same rocky landscape that had been there all morning. Then, at the extreme edge of his vision, he caught a brief flash of movement among a cluster of boulders approximately 800 meters out. Someone was definitely out there, and, whoever it was, they were trying to remain hidden. The sniper's finger moved to the trigger guard, not quite touching the trigger itself but positioned for immediate action if required. Thompson held his breath, realizing he was about to witness precision marksmanship at its finest. The movement in the rocks continued, and, through his binoculars, the general could now make out what appeared to be at least two individuals attempting to establish a position overlooking the base's main gate. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. The sniper remained perfectly still, gathering information and assessing the threat level. Thompson knew this was the mark of a professional, the ability to wait, to gather intelligence, and to make the right decision at the right moment. Lesser shooters might have taken hasty shots, potentially compromising their position and alerting other enemy forces in the area. The radio in Thompson's ear came alive with reports from perimeter patrols. They had detected possible hostile movement in Grid Square 74 Alpha, the exact area where the sniper was maintaining observation. The coincidence was too perfect to be accidental. Somehow, this shooter had detected the threat before the patrol units, demonstrating the kind of situational awareness that came only with exceptional training and experience. Thompson watched as the sniper made microscopic adjustments to the scope, compensating for wind conditions and distance. The barrel of the massive rifle moved so slightly that someone not specifically watching for it would never have noticed. These were the calculations that separated expert marksmen from average soldiers, understanding ballistics, environmental factors, and human psychology well enough to place shots with surgical precision at extreme distances. The general's attention was suddenly drawn to movement much closer to their position. Another soldier was approaching the sniper's nest, moving with the confident stride of someone delivering important information. Thompson recognized the figure as Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from the intelligence section, carrying what appeared to be updated target information. Rodriguez approached the sniper with obvious respect, dropping to one knee and speaking in whispers that Thompson couldn't quite make out. The conversation was brief and professional, with the sniper nodding acknowledgement while never taking their eyes off the target area. Rodriguez handed over what looked like a range card with updated intelligence, then departed as quietly as he had arrived. The exchange told Thompson several important things about the sniper he was observing. First, they were clearly integrated with the base's intelligence network, receiving real-time updates on threats and target information. Second, they commanded respect from other soldiers, as evidenced by Rodriguez's deferential approach. Third, they were trusted with sensitive information, suggesting a security clearance and position that went beyond standard infantry roles. As the morning wore on, Thompson found himself increasingly impressed by what he was witnessing. The snipers' discipline never wavered, their attention never drifted, and their readiness never diminished. This was the kind of soldier every general hoped to have under their command, dedicated, skilled, and absolutely reliable in critical situations. The sun climbed higher, increasing the heat that shimmered off the rocky terrain below. Thompson knew that these conditions made accurate shooting more challenging, as heat waves could distort vision and affect bullet trajectory. Yet the snipers showed no signs of discomfort or decreased effectiveness. If anything, they seemed to anticipate and compensate for the changing conditions with the ease of someone who had operated in similar environments many times before. Around noon, the situation in the valley began to develop rapidly. Thompson's radio erupted with multiple reports of enemy movement, and he could see through his binoculars that the hostile forces were becoming more active. What had started as subtle reconnaissance was evolving into what appeared to be preparation for an attack on the base perimeter. The sniper's response was immediate and professional. Without breaking concentration on the primary target area, they activated a small communication device and began providing real-time intelligence to the Tactical Operations Center. Thompson could hear fragments of the reports, precise grid coordinates, enemy strength estimates, and tactical assessments delivered in calm, clear language despite the increasing tension of the situation. Thompson realized he was witnessing more than exceptional marksmanship. This soldier was functioning as the eyes and ears of the entire base defense system, providing critical intelligence that would shape the response to the developing threat. The position had been chosen not just for its shooting opportunities, but for its comprehensive view of the most likely attack routes. As the enemy forces in the valley continued their preparations, Thompson made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing his passive observation, he decided to approach the sniper directly. There was something about this soldier's performance that demanded recognition, and, as the commanding general, he felt compelled to personally acknowledge the exceptional service he was witnessing. Thompson began moving toward the sniper's position, taking care to approach from an angle that wouldn't interfere with the field of fire. As he drew closer, he could see more details of the equipment setup. The rifle was mounted on a bipod that had been precisely positioned for maximum stability. Additional magazines were arranged within easy reach, along with range cards, weather monitoring equipment, and communication devices. This wasn't just a shooting position, it was a complete intelligence gathering and precision fire platform. The general was now close enough to see the sniper's profile beneath the boonie hat. What he observed made him pause mid-step. The features he could make out were more delicate than he had expected, and there was something about the overall appearance that challenged his assumptions about who this exceptional soldier might be. As Thompson continued his approach, the sniper became aware of his presence without breaking concentration on the target area. A slight tilt of the head acknowledged the general's approach while maintaining complete focus on the mission at hand. This peripheral awareness while maintaining primary focus was another mark of elite training and experience. Thompson positioned himself where he could speak without compromising the sniper's sight picture. He was about to announce himself when his eyes fell on something that made him stop completely. There, clearly visible on the upper sleeve of the sniper's combat uniform, was a unit insignia unlike anything he had seen in his decades of military service. The patch was distinctive, a combination of symbols that spoke to both exceptional skill and legendary status within the military community. Thompson's extensive knowledge of military units and their insignia told him immediately that he was looking at something extraordinary. This wasn't just any sniper. This was someone whose reputation extended far beyond the normal bounds of military recognition. The general felt his breath catch as the full implications of what he was seeing began to register. The insignia represented a level of achievement and recognition that existed in the realm of military legend. He had heard stories, whispered conversations among senior officers about soldiers whose skills transcended normal human capability, but he had always assumed such tales were exaggerated. Now, staring at the proof before him, Thompson realized he was in the presence of something far more significant than a routine inspection had prepared him for. The soldier maintaining overwatch of his base wasn't just exceptionally skilled, they were the stuff of military mythology made real. The general's mind raced through the implications of this discovery. What was a soldier of this caliber doing at his forward operating base? How had their presence gone unnoticed in his previous briefings? And, most importantly, what threat had brought someone of this legendary status to this particular corner of Afghanistan? As Thompson stood there, processing the magnitude of his discovery, the sniper continued their vigilant watch over the valley below. The mission came first, always, regardless of who might be observing. This unwavering dedication to duty, even in the presence of the commanding general, spoke to a level of professionalism that matched everything the insignia represented. The general knew that what happened next would be crucial. He was face to face with military legend, and how he handled this moment would define not just his relationship with this extraordinary soldier, but potentially the outcome of whatever operation had brought them to his base. The morning sun continued its climb across the Afghan sky as General Thompson stood frozen, staring at the insignia that had just rewritten everything he thought he knew about the soldiers under his command. The legend was real, and she was lying prone behind a .50 caliber rifle, protecting his base with skills that existed beyond the boundaries of normal human capability. The weight of this discovery settled on Thompson's shoulders as he realized he was about to have a conversation that would challenge everything he thought he knew about warfare, about soldiers, and about the hidden forces that operated in the shadows to keep America safe. The legendary sniper continued her watch, ready for whatever came next, while the general struggled to find words adequate for addressing someone whose very existence redefined the possible. General Thompson stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, his eyes fixed on the insignia that had stopped him cold. The patch displayed a silver wolf's head surrounded by 13 stars, with crossed rifles beneath and a single word that made his blood run cold: Phantom. He had heard whispers of this unit in classified briefings, stories that seemed too incredible to be true. Now he was staring at proof that the legends were real. The Phantom unit was military mythology. Soldiers who operated beyond the normal chain of command, answering directly to the highest levels of government. They were the ones sent when conventional forces couldn't complete the mission, when the impossible needed to become possible. Thompson had served 30 years in the military and had never met anyone who claimed to have worked directly with a Phantom operative. As he processed this revelation, the sniper slowly began to turn toward him. The movement was fluid and controlled, maintaining awareness of the target area while acknowledging his presence. When their eyes met, Thompson felt the full impact of recognition hit him like a physical blow. The face beneath the boonie hat belonged to a woman, but not just any woman. Even partially obscured by tactical gear and shooting glasses, he could see features that were both beautiful and hardened by experiences most soldiers would never survive. Her eyes held depths that spoke of operations conducted in the darkest corners of the world, of missions that would never appear in official records. "General Thompson," she said, her voice carrying a slight southern accent that seemed incongruous with the deadly efficiency she represented. "I'm Sergeant Major Sarah Mitchell. I believe we need to talk." Thompson felt his training kick in, overriding the shock of the moment. Sergeant Major, I wasn't aware we had Phantom Unit personnel on this base. Sarah's smile was slight but carried hints of experiences that would give most people nightmares. Sir, with respect, there's a lot about this operation that isn't in your standard briefings. My presence here wasn't coincidental. She gestured toward the valley below, where the enemy activity was continuing to develop. We've been tracking a high-value target for 6 months. Intelligence suggests he's planning something significant, and this base is directly in the line of fire. I've been tasked with ensuring that doesn't happen. Thompson looked out over the terrain with new understanding. The increased enemy activity we've been seeing is reconnaissance for a major assault, Sarah finished. They're not just probing your defenses, General. They're planning to overrun this position and use it as a staging area for attacks deeper into Allied territory. My job is to make sure their key personnel don't live to see that plan executed. The general felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The enhanced security measures that had been implemented over the past month, the additional intelligence assets that had been deployed to the region, the subtle changes in patrol patterns that he had attributed to routine operational adjustments, all of it had been preparation for this moment. How long have you been here? Thompson asked. 3 weeks, Sarah replied, her attention split between the conversation and maintaining overwatch of the valley. I've been operating under deep cover, integrated with your regular forces. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has been my primary contact for intelligence coordination. Thompson remembered the respectful way Rodriguez had approached earlier. It made sense now, the intelligence sergeant had known exactly who he was dealing with. And your mission parameters? Sarah's expression grew more serious. Elimination of primary target and disruption of planned assault operations. Secondary objective is protection of base personnel and assets. The target we're tracking is responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. Taking him out will save hundreds of lives. As if summoned by their conversation, Rodriguez appeared again, moving with urgent purpose. He approached the sniper's nest with obvious news, dropping into position beside Sarah with practiced efficiency. Phantom, we've got positive identification on the primary target, Rodriguez reported in hushed tones. Drone surveillance confirms Hassan al-Rashid is in the valley, grid coordinates 74 Alpha 67. He's moved into the secondary observation post as predicted. Sarah's entire demeanor shifted into combat mode. Distance to target? 920 meters, with a 15-knot crosswind from the southeast, Rodriguez provided. Thermal imaging shows 4 additional personnel in supporting positions. Thompson watched as Sarah began making minute adjustments to her equipment. Every movement was precise and purposeful, the result of training that had pushed human capability to its absolute limits. The general had witnessed many combat operations during his career, but nothing had prepared him for observing a phantom operative preparing for a mission. General, Sarah said without taking her eyes off the scope, I need you to coordinate with your Tactical Operations Center. In approximately 10 minutes, I'm going to eliminate the primary target. The remaining enemy personnel will likely attempt to withdraw through routes Charlie and Delta. I need your patrols positioned to intercept. Thompson activated his radio, connecting directly to the base operations center. TOC, this is Thunder 6. Execute containment protocol for Grid Square 74 Alpha. Position units at withdrawal routes Charlie and Delta. Stand by for sniper engagement in 10 minutes. The response was immediate and professional. Thompson's staff had been briefed on special operations protocols, though they hadn't been told about Sarah's specific identity. Now everything was falling into place with the precision of a well-orchestrated symphony. Sarah had settled back into her shooting position, but Thompson noticed subtle differences in her posture now that she was preparing for actual engagement. The rifle seemed to become part of her body, an extension of her will rather than a separate tool. Her breathing had shifted into the rhythm he recognized from elite marksmen, but with a level of control that seemed almost supernatural. Phantom, this is Overwatch, came a voice through Sarah's communication device. Drone feed confirms target is stationary in position 74 Alpha 67. No movement detected from supporting personnel. Wind conditions are steady at 15 knots southeast. You are cleared for engagement when ready. Thompson found himself holding his breath as he watched Sarah prepare to take a shot that would require extraordinary skill under any circumstances. At over 900 meters, with wind conditions and multiple potential targets in the area, the margin for error was essentially zero. A missed shot would alert the enemy to their position and potentially compromise not just the mission, but the safety of everyone on the base. "General," Sarah said softly, "you might want to observe through your binoculars. This is going to be a textbook demonstration of why the Phantom unit exists." Thompson raised his binoculars and focused on the area where Sarah's rifle was aimed. Through the magnified view, he could see movement among the rocks, but it was difficult to distinguish specific individuals. The terrain provided excellent concealment, which explained why the enemy had chosen this position for their reconnaissance activities. "Range 920 meters, Sarah murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "Wind 15 knots from southeast, temperature 92 degrees, humidity 38%. "Target is stationary, partially concealed behind large boulder formation." Thompson watched through his binoculars as Sarah's breathing fell into the final rhythm that preceded the shot. 4 counts in, pause, 4 counts out, pause. In that moment of absolute stillness, when her body was completely motionless and her mind was focused with laser-like intensity, Sarah Mitchell became something more than human. She became the perfect weapon. The Barrett M82 erupted with a sound that echoed across the valley like thunder. The .50 caliber round left the barrel at over 2,800 feet per second, covering the distance to the target in less than 2 seconds. Thompson watched through his binoculars as the massive bullet found its mark with surgical precision. Hassan al-Rashid, one of the most wanted terrorist leaders in Afghanistan, ceased to exist in an instant. The shot had been so precise that the other enemy personnel didn't immediately realize what had happened. For several seconds, they continued their activities, unaware that their leader and the architect of their planned assault was dead. "Target eliminated," Sarah reported calmly into her communication device. "Secondary targets are beginning to realize the situation. Recommend immediate movement of containment units." Thompson watched as chaos erupted in the enemy position. The remaining personnel quickly understood they were under sniper attack and began attempting to withdraw through exactly the routes that Sarah had predicted. The general's respect for her tactical intelligence was growing by the minute. "All units, this is Thunder 6, Thompson broadcast. Enemy personnel are moving through withdrawal routes as anticipated. Initiate containment protocol now." The next 20 minutes unfolded like a perfectly choreographed military operation. Sarah continued to provide overwatch and intelligence while Thompson's ground units moved to intercept the fleeing enemy personnel. Her accurate predictions about their withdrawal routes enabled the capture of 3 additional high-value targets and the recovery of significant intelligence materials. As the immediate tactical situation stabilized, Thompson found himself looking at Sarah with new understanding. This wasn't just about exceptional marksmanship or tactical intelligence. The Phantom unit represented a level of military capability that existed in a realm beyond conventional warfare. "Sergeant Major," Thompson said, "that was the most impressive demonstration of combat effectiveness I've witnessed in 30 years of service." Sarah began the process of securing her equipment with the same methodical precision she had shown in everything else. "General, what you witnessed today was the result of training programs that push human performance beyond normal limitations. The Phantom unit doesn't just train soldiers, we create weapons systems where the human element is optimized to levels most people would consider impossible." Thompson watched as she disassembled the Barrett M82 with practiced efficiency. "How many of you are there?" "That's classified, sir," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "But I can tell you that we're deployed anywhere American interests are threatened by problems that conventional forces can't solve. Sometimes that means deep cover operations in hostile territory. Sometimes it means protecting forward operating bases from threats that haven't made it into intelligence briefings yet." The general considered the implications of what he was learning. "And your training?" Sarah paused in her equipment maintenance to look directly at him. 2 years of selection and training that makes Special Forces qualification look like basic training. We learn languages, cultural integration, advanced combat techniques, intelligence gathering, and specialized skills that are tailored to individual operatives. The psychological evaluation alone eliminates 90% of candidates before they even begin the physical challenges. Thompson found himself wondering about the personal cost of such training. And the personal toll? For the first time since their conversation began, Sarah's expression showed something that might have been vulnerability. "General, we sacrifice things that normal soldiers never have to consider. Relationships, family connections, sometimes even our own identities become casualties of what we do. The Phantom Unit creates the most effective soldiers in the world, but the price is measured in parts of ourselves that we can never get back. The admission hung in the air between them, revealing depths of sacrifice that went far beyond physical danger. Thompson was beginning to understand that the Phantom Unit represented not just military capability, but human cost on a scale that challenged basic assumptions about what could be asked of soldiers in service to their country. "But you continue to serve," Thompson observed. Sarah's smile returned, but it was tinged with something that spoke to experiences most people would never survive. "General, someone has to stand between the darkness and the people who sleep peacefully in their beds at night. We do what we do so that mothers don't have to worry about their children, so that families can plan for the future without wondering if tomorrow will come. The cost is high, but the alternative is unacceptable." Thompson felt a profound respect for the woman standing before him. In 30 years of military service, he had met heroes, warriors, and leaders who inspired armies. But Sarah Mitchell represented something different, a soldier who had sacrificed pieces of her own humanity to protect the humanity of others. "What happens now?" Thompson asked. Sarah secured the last piece of equipment in her kit with practiced efficiency. "Now I disappear back into the shadows, General. The mission here is complete, but there are always more threats, always more problems that need the kind of solution only the Phantom Unit can provide." As if summoned by her words, a helicopter approached the landing zone at the edge of the base. Thompson could see it was a specialized aircraft, not part of his normal transportation assets. The Phantom Unit apparently had its own logistics and support systems that operated independently of conventional military channels. "That's my ride," Sarah said, shouldering her equipment pack. "General, it's been an honor serving under your command, even if you didn't know I was here." Thompson extended his hand, and Sarah shook it with a grip that spoke to strength developed through training most people couldn't survive. "Sergeant Major, the honor has been mine. What you've shown me today has changed my understanding of what's possible in military service." Sarah began walking toward the helicopter, but paused after a few steps and turned back to face the general. "Sir, if I may offer some advice?" "Of course. The world is changing faster than our conventional military structures can adapt. The threats we face today require solutions that exist outside normal operational parameters. The Phantom Unit represents one approach to those challenges, but there need to be others. The soldiers under your command have capabilities they don't even know about yet. Trust them with more than you think they can handle, and you might be surprised by what becomes possible." With those words, Sarah Mitchell walked toward the helicopter that would carry her back into the shadows from which she had emerged. Thompson watched until the aircraft disappeared beyond the horizon, taking with it a soldier whose very existence challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare, about service, and about the price of protecting freedom in an increasingly dangerous world. 3 days after Sarah Mitchell's departure, General Thompson found himself unable to concentrate on routine base operations. The encounter with the Phantom Unit operative had fundamentally changed his perspective on military capabilities and the hidden wars being fought beyond public awareness. He spent hours reviewing classified databases, searching for any additional information about the unit that had briefly operated under his command. What he discovered in those classified files painted a picture that was both fascinating and deeply troubling. The Phantom Unit had been established 15 years earlier in response to threats that conventional military forces couldn't address. Their operations spanned the globe, from counter-terrorism missions in the Middle East to intelligence gathering in hostile nations where American military presence was officially non-existent. Thompson learned that Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any Phantom operative. Her service record, heavily redacted though it was, revealed a soldier whose capabilities bordered on the legendary. She had been recruited directly from Marine Scout Sniper School, where she had broken every marksmanship record in the program's history. Her psychological evaluations indicated intelligence levels that placed her in the top fraction of 1% of the population, combined with a stress tolerance that defied normal human limitations. The general's research revealed that Sarah's journey to the Phantom Unit had begun with tragedy. Her younger brother had been killed in a terrorist attack while serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Somalia. The event had transformed her from a college student studying engineering into someone driven by a need to prevent similar tragedies from befalling other families. Her application to the Marine Corps had been submitted the day after her brother's funeral. Thompson found himself reading testimonials from commanding officers who had encountered Sarah during her conventional military service. They described a soldier who consistently exceeded expectations, who volunteered for the most dangerous assignments, and who possessed an almost supernatural ability to adapt to hostile environments. One report mentioned her spending 3 months living among Afghan villagers, learning local dialects and customs while gathering intelligence on Taliban operations. The transformation from conventional Marine to Phantom operative had taken 2 years of training that pushed human endurance beyond normal limits. Thompson discovered training records that detailed survival exercises conducted in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to tropical jungles, language immersion programs that produced native-level fluency in multiple dialects, and combat training that incorporated techniques from special operations forces around the world. But it was the psychological training that truly set the Phantom unit apart. Sarah had undergone conditioning that enabled her to maintain operational effectiveness under stress levels that would incapacitate normal soldiers. She had learned to compartmentalize emotions, to function independently for extended periods, and to make life-and-death decisions without the support structures that conventional forces relied upon. Thompson's investigation also revealed the personal cost of such training. Medical records showed that Sarah had sustained injuries during her preparation that would have ended the careers of most soldiers. A training accident during Arctic survival exercises had resulted in severe frostbite that required the amputation of 2 toes. A combat training mishap had left her with a scar that ran from her left shoulder to her elbow. Each injury had been endured without complaint, treated as necessary steps toward becoming the perfect weapon. The general found himself particularly disturbed by psychological evaluations that documented the gradual erosion of normal human connections during Sarah's transformation into a Phantom operative. Early reports described a young woman who maintained close relationships with family and friends, who laughed easily and showed normal emotional responses to stress. Later evaluations revealed someone who had learned to suppress emotional reactions, who had difficulty maintaining personal relationships, and who exhibited the kind of detachment that enabled effective operation in extreme circumstances. Thompson discovered that Sarah's family had been told she was killed in action during a classified operation in Iraq. Her parents had been presented with a flag and a medal, while she had been reborn as someone who could never contact them again. The sacrifice involved in becoming a Phantom operative extended beyond personal comfort or safety. It required the complete abandonment of previous identity and connections. As the general continued his research, he began to understand the broader context of Sarah's presence at his base. Intelligence reports revealed that the terrorist leader she had eliminated was planning something far more significant than a simple assault on the forward operating base. Hassan al-Rashid had been coordinating with international networks to establish a training center that would have produced hundreds of operatives capable of conducting attacks throughout Europe and North America. The elimination of al-Rashid had disrupted networks that extended far beyond Afghanistan. Intelligence gathered from the captured personnel revealed connections to terrorist cells in 12 countries, with planned operations that would have resulted in thousands of civilian casualties. Sarah's single shot had prevented a cascade of violence that would have altered the course of global counterterrorism efforts. Thompson learned that the Phantom unit's success rate in preventing such catastrophic attacks was nearly perfect. In 15 years of operations, they had stopped 17 major terrorist plots, eliminated 43 high-value targets, and gathered intelligence that had led to the disruption of countless smaller operations. The unit's effectiveness came at a cost measured in the humanity of its operatives, but the results justified methods that would be unthinkable under normal circumstances. The general's research also revealed disturbing information about the selection process for Phantom operatives. Candidates were identified through psychological profiling that looked for specific combinations of intelligence, emotional resilience, and what the files euphemistically called moral flexibility. They were individuals capable of making decisions that would haunt normal people, but who could continue functioning effectively despite the psychological burden of their actions. Thompson discovered that Sarah had been identified as a potential Phantom candidate during her initial Marine Corps training. Instructors had noted her ability to remain calm under extreme stress, her exceptional marksmanship abilities, and her tendency to volunteer for assignments that other soldiers avoided. More importantly, they had identified the emotional detachment that had developed following her brother's death, a quality that made her capable of operating effectively without the emotional support systems that most people required. The transformation process had been carefully managed to preserve Sarah's operational effectiveness while gradually removing the human connections that might compromise her ability to complete missions. She had been systematically isolated from former friends and family members through a combination of training requirements, geographical assignments, and psychological conditioning that made maintaining relationships increasingly difficult. Thompson found records of the last conversation Sarah had with her parents before her official death. The transcript revealed a young woman struggling to balance her sense of duty with her love for family, knowing that she was about to disappear from their lives forever. Her father had sensed something was wrong but had been unable to penetrate the operational security that surrounded her transition to the Phantom unit. The general also discovered that Sarah's exceptional performance had made her one of the most valuable assets in the Phantom unit's history. Her mission success rate was perfect, with 17 completed operations that had eliminated high-value targets while gathering critical intelligence. She had operated in environments ranging from urban centers and hostile nations to remote wilderness areas where survival required skills that few humans possessed. But Thompson's research also revealed the cost of such success. Medical evaluations showed that Sarah exhibited symptoms consistent with chronic stress exposure, despite her apparent emotional detachment. Sleep disorders, hypervigilance, and difficulty with interpersonal relationships were documented as occupational hazards of Phantom service. The unit's medical staff treated these conditions as necessary sacrifices rather than problems to be solved. The general learned that the average career length for a Phantom operative was 7 years before psychological or physical limitations required retirement from active service. Sarah had been operating at peak effectiveness for over a decade, making her an anomaly within an already exceptional population. Her longevity was attributed to an unusual combination of physical resilience and psychological adaptability that enabled her to continue functioning when others would have broken under the strain. Thompson discovered that retirement from the Phantom unit involved a complex process of identity reconstruction and reintegration into civilian society. Former operatives were provided with new identities, financial support, and psychological counseling designed to help them rebuild the human connections that their service had required them to sacrifice. The success rate for this reintegration was approximately 60%, with the remainder struggling with depression, anxiety, and difficulty forming meaningful relationships. The files revealed that Sarah was approaching the point where retirement would typically be recommended. Medical evaluations indicated that while she remained physically capable of continued service, the psychological strain was beginning to show in subtle ways that could eventually compromise her operational effectiveness. The decision about whether to continue her service was described as one of the most difficult choices facing the Phantom unit's leadership. Thompson found himself wondering about Sarah's thoughts on her future. Did she want to continue serving in a capacity that required such tremendous personal sacrifice? Was she capable of transitioning to a normal life after more than a decade of operating beyond the boundaries of conventional human experience? The files provided no insight into her personal feelings about these questions, reflecting the emotional compartmentalization that made her effective as an operative. The general's research also revealed the broader implications of the Phantom unit's existence. Similar programs had been established by other nations, creating a shadow world of elite operatives who conducted operations that would never appear in official records. The existence of these programs represented a new form of warfare that operated outside traditional military and legal frameworks, where individual soldiers became strategic weapons capable of altering the balance of international relations. Thompson learned that the Phantom unit's operations were coordinated at the highest levels of government, with mission parameters established by committees that included representatives from the Pentagon, CIA, and National Security Council. The unit operated with authorities that transcended normal military command structures, reporting directly to officials whose identities were classified above Thompson's security clearance level. The discovery of Sarah's true identity and mission had opened Thompson's eyes to a world that existed parallel to conventional military operations. It was a realm where exceptional individuals sacrificed their humanity to protect the humanity of others, where the impossible was accomplished through methods that challenged basic assumptions about human limitations and moral boundaries. As Thompson completed his research and closed the classified files, he found himself changed by what he had learned. The encounter with Sarah Mitchell had revealed depths of sacrifice and capability that existed far beyond his previous understanding. He now knew that soldiers like her operated in the shadows around the world, preventing catastrophes that the public would never know about, paying prices that few people could comprehend. The general realized that his brief encounter with the Phantom unit had fundamentally altered his perspective on leadership, on service, and on the hidden costs of protecting freedom in an increasingly complex and dangerous world. Sarah Mitchell represented the pinnacle of military capability, but she also embodied the tragic necessity of sacrificing individual humanity for the preservation of collective security. Thompson understood now that the war being fought in the shadows by operatives like Sarah was as important as any conventional military conflict, perhaps more so. It was a war where victory was measured not in territory gained or enemies defeated, but in catastrophes prevented and lives saved. It was a war fought by soldiers who had given up their own lives so that others might live in safety, never knowing how close they had come to unimaginable tragedy. The knowledge weighed heavily on Thompson's mind as he returned to his routine duties as base commander. He now sought his conventional military responsibilities in a new context, understanding that his soldiers were part of a larger system that included capabilities and sacrifices that most of them would never comprehend. The burden of that knowledge would stay with him for the rest of his career, a reminder of the hidden heroes who operated beyond the boundaries of conventional recognition. 6 months after Sarah Mitchell's departure from his forward operating base, General Thompson received an encrypted message that would change everything he thought he knew about duty, sacrifice, and the true meaning of heroism. The communication came through channels so classified that only 3 people on his base had the security clearance to access them. What he read in that message would haunt him for the rest of his military career. Sarah Mitchell was missing in action. The message, signed by officials whose titles were redacted but whose authority was unmistakable, provided limited details about a mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. Sarah had been deployed to a hostile nation where American military presence was officially non-existent, tasked with eliminating a target whose death was critical to preventing a terrorist attack that could have killed thousands of civilians. The operation had been compromised through intelligence leaks that the message attributed to hostile foreign intelligence services. Sarah had been surrounded by enemy forces while attempting to complete her mission, and her last communication had indicated that she was trapped in a situation with no possibility of extraction or escape. The message concluded with a request for Thompson's assistance in a search and recovery operation that would require absolute secrecy and complete deniability. Thompson stared at the encrypted text for long minutes, processing the implications of what he was reading. The woman who had demonstrated superhuman capabilities at his base, who had eliminated a high-value target with surgical precision, who had seemed invincible in her professional competence, was now in a situation that had defeated even her extraordinary skills. The general's first instinct was to mobilize every available resource for a rescue operation. His experience told him that no soldier should be left behind, regardless of the political or operational complications involved. But, as he continued reading the classified briefing materials that accompanied the message, he began to understand the complexity of the situation that had led to Sarah's capture. The target she had been sent to eliminate was Viktor Petrov, a Russian intelligence operative who had been providing advanced weapons technology to terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East and North Africa. Petrov's network was responsible for supplying the sophisticated explosive devices that had been used in attacks across 3 continents, killing hundreds of civilians and destabilizing entire regions. Intelligence indicated that Petrov was planning to provide nuclear materials to terrorist groups within the next 2 weeks. Sarah's mission was to prevent the transfer by eliminating Petrov before the handoff could occur. The operation required deep cover insertion into territory controlled by hostile forces, with no official support and no possibility of rescue if things went wrong. Thompson learned that Sarah had successfully infiltrated the target area and had been in position to complete her mission when the intelligence leak had exposed her presence to enemy forces. Rather than abort the operation and allow the nuclear materials transfer to proceed, she had chosen to continue with the mission despite knowing that her position was compromised and that escape was impossible. The general found himself reading tactical reports that described a running battle that had lasted for 18 hours. Sarah had been pursued through hostile territory by forces that outnumbered her by more than 50 to 1. Despite impossible odds, she had continued moving toward the target, using her exceptional training and equipment to stay ahead of her pursuers while seeking opportunities to complete her mission. Thompson's respect for Sarah's tactical capabilities grew as he read descriptions of how she had used the terrain, weather conditions, and enemy psychology to maintain her operational effectiveness despite being completely surrounded. She had eliminated 17 enemy personnel while moving toward her target, using a combination of precision shooting, improvised explosives, and psychological warfare that had sowed confusion among her pursuers. The reports indicated that Sarah had come within 200 meters of her target before being forced to take shelter in a cave system that provided temporary protection from the forces hunting her. Her last communication had indicated that she had visual contact with Petrov's location but was unable to achieve a clear shot due to civilian presence in the target area. Thompson realized that even in her final moments of freedom, Sarah had maintained the moral standards that defined the best of American military service. She could have taken a shot that would have eliminated her target but might have resulted in civilian casualties, and she had chosen to wait for a clean opportunity that never came. The search and recovery operation that Thompson was being asked to support involved inserting a team of phantom operatives into the hostile territory where Sarah had last been seen. The mission would be conducted under the cover of a routine training exercise, with Thompson's base providing logistical support and communications coordination. If questioned by oversight authorities, he was to maintain that the operation was a standard counter-terrorism training scenario. Thompson understood immediately that he was being asked to participate in an operation that violated numerous military regulations and international laws. The insertion of Special Operations Forces into sovereign territory without official authorization was an act of war that could have catastrophic diplomatic consequences if discovered. Yet he also understood that a soldier of Sarah's caliber could not be abandoned without exhausting every possible option for recovery. The general spent the next 72 hours coordinating the most complex military operation of his career. Teams of phantom operatives began arriving at his base through channels that existed outside normal military logistics. Equipment appeared overnight without requisition or documentation. Communications networks were established using frequencies and protocols that weren't part of any standard military manual. Thompson found himself working with soldiers whose capabilities rivaled Sarah's own. The team leader introduced himself only as Colonel Smith, though the general suspected that wasn't his real name. Smith displayed the same combination of exceptional competence and emotional detachment that Thompson had observed in Sarah, suggesting training and experience that existed beyond normal human limitations. The briefing sessions revealed the scope of the challenge they faced. Sarah was being held in a facility that was heavily guarded and located in terrain that provided natural defensive advantages. Intelligence indicated that her captors were aware of her value as a source of information about American special operations capabilities and were taking extraordinary measures to prevent any rescue attempt. Thompson learned that Sarah's capture had created a crisis that extended far beyond her individual fate. The Phantom unit's operational security depended on the absolute secrecy of their existence and capabilities. If Sarah was forced to reveal information about the unit's structure, training, or ongoing operations, it could compromise missions around the world and endanger hundreds of operatives. The rescue operation was planned with precision that reflected both the exceptional capabilities of the operatives involved and the desperate nature of the situation. The team would be inserted at night using helicopter transport that would mimic routine patrol patterns. They would approach the target facility on foot across terrain that provided minimal cover, relying on individual skill and coordination to overcome defensive positions that were designed to repel conventional military assault. Thompson found himself wondering about Sarah's condition during the days leading up to the rescue attempt. Intelligence reports suggested that she was being subjected to interrogation techniques that would break most people within hours. Yet her psychological profile indicated that she possessed resistance to coercion that bordered on the superhuman. The question was whether even her exceptional mental conditioning could withstand the methods being employed against her. The night of the rescue operation, Thompson positioned himself in the base communications center, monitoring radio traffic and satellite feeds that provided real-time updates on the team's progress. What he witnessed over the next 8 hours challenged his understanding of what was possible in military operations. The insertion was executed flawlessly, with the team reaching their staging area without detection. The approach to the target facility demonstrated tactical capabilities that seemed to defy physics, as operatives moved across open terrain without being spotted by guards equipped with night vision and thermal imaging equipment. The assault on the facility itself was a masterpiece of precision warfare. Thompson watched through drone feeds as the rescue team neutralized defensive positions using methods that left no evidence of their presence. Guards were eliminated silently and efficiently, with the team moving through the facility like shadows that could strike without warning. When they reached Sarah's cell, Thompson held his breath as he watched the reunion through grainy video feeds. What he saw challenged every assumption he had made about human resilience and the limits of endurance. Sarah Mitchell walked out of that facility under her own power, carrying herself with the same dignity and competence that he remembered from their brief encounter at his base. The extraction was as flawless as the insertion had been. Within minutes, the team was moving away from the facility, carrying intelligence materials that had been gathered during the rescue operation. Enemy forces didn't discover the breach until hours later, by which time the rescue team was already approaching the extraction point. Thompson watched the helicopter carrying Sarah and her rescuers disappear into the darkness, knowing that he had participated in an operation that would never appear in official records but that represented the finest traditions of military service. The rescue had succeeded not just in recovering a valuable operative, but in demonstrating the lengths to which American forces would go to ensure that no soldier was left behind. In the days following the rescue operation, Thompson received fragmentary reports about Sarah's condition and the intelligence that had been gathered during her captivity. Despite 18 days of imprisonment and interrogation, she had revealed nothing that could compromise ongoing operations or endanger other operatives. Her resistance had been so complete that her captors had been unable to confirm even her true identity. The intelligence materials recovered during the rescue operation revealed the full scope of the nuclear materials transfer that Sarah's original mission had been designed to prevent. Viktor Petrov had indeed been preparing to provide terrorist organizations with materials capable of producing radiological weapons that could have contaminated major urban areas and killed thousands of people. Thompson learned that Sarah's capture had actually facilitated a larger operation that resulted in the disruption of Petrov's entire network. Her presence in the facility had provided intelligence about the organization's structure and operations that led to coordinated strikes against terrorist cells in 12 countries. In being captured, she had ultimately achieved a strategic victory that exceeded the objectives of her original mission. The general also discovered that Sarah's rescue had been complicated by her own actions during captivity. Rather than simply enduring interrogation, she had actively gathered intelligence about her captors and their operations. Information she had collected while in prison led to the identification of the intelligence leak that had compromised her original mission and resulted in the arrest of 3 double agents operating within Allied intelligence services. Thompson received one final message regarding Sarah Mitchell 3 weeks after her rescue. The encrypted communication informed him that she had completed medical treatment and psychological evaluation and had requested immediate return to active duty. Despite everything she had endured, her commitment to the mission of the Phantom Unit remained absolute. The message also contained a personal note that Sarah had asked to be forwarded to Thompson. In language that was characteristically direct and professional, she thanked him for his support during the rescue operation and expressed appreciation for his discretion regarding her presence at his base. She concluded by noting that their brief encounter had reminded her why the sacrifices demanded by her service were worthwhile. Thompson read that note multiple times, understanding that it represented more than simple courtesy. For someone who had been forced to abandon normal human connections, the professional respect of a fellow soldier carried weight that civilians could never comprehend. In acknowledging his support, Sarah was recognizing him as part of the brotherhood that sustained soldiers who operated beyond the boundaries of conventional recognition. The general folded the note carefully and placed it in his personal files, knowing that it would serve as a permanent reminder of his encounter with military excellence in its purest form. Sarah Mitchell represented everything that was finest about American military service: courage, competence, and commitment that transcended personal cost or public recognition. As Thompson returned to his routine duties as base commander, he carried with him knowledge that changed his perspective on leadership and service. He had witnessed capabilities that existed beyond normal human limitations, sacrifices that challenged basic assumptions about what could be asked of soldiers, and dedication that transformed individual service members into strategic assets capable of altering the balance of international security. The encounter with Sarah Mitchell and the subsequent rescue operation had revealed to Thompson a hidden dimension of military service where exceptional individuals sacrificed everything to protect others who would never know their names or understand their contributions. It was a realm where heroism was measured not in public recognition, but in catastrophes prevented and lives saved through actions that would remain forever classified. General Thompson understood now that soldiers like Sarah Mitchell operated throughout the world, standing between civilization and chaos with skills and dedication that existed beyond public comprehension. They were the guardians who watched in the darkness, who made the impossible decisions and paid the unbearable prices so that others might sleep peacefully in their beds, never knowing how close they had come to unimaginable horror. The knowledge of their existence and sacrifice would remain with Thompson for the rest of his life, a reminder that true heroism often operated in the shadows, unrecognized and unacknowledged, but absolutely essential to the preservation of everything that made life worth living. Sarah Mitchell had shown him that the highest form of military service involved not just risking one's life for others, but sacrificing one's very identity and humanity so that others might remain free to be human. In the end, Thompson realized that his encounter with the legendary sniper had taught him the most important lesson of his military career, that freedom's greatest defenders were often those who sacrificed their own freedom completely, becoming something more and less than human so that humanity itself might survive and prosper. Sarah Mitchell was more than a soldier, she was a guardian angel whose wings were made of steel and whose halo was forged from the sacrifices that most people could never understand or appreciate.